The Galactic Council had been meeting for hours when the news arrived. A strange object had been detected in a remote sector of space, a place few ships dared to venture. It wasn't just any object. It was enormous, far larger than anything they had ever seen. And what was even more puzzling, it seemed to be drifting aimlessly through the void, as if forgotten by time itself. Commander Tal of the Galactic Council, a strict but fair leader, called for immediate action. "We must investigate this anomaly," he said firmly. "No matter what it is, it could be important." The council members murmured in agreement, their voices filled with curiosity and skepticism. Ambassador Jor, known for his diplomatic skills, was the first to speak. "It looks like an old ship," he said, "but surely it's nothing more than a relic of a long-dead civilization. I suggest we send a small team to examine it, but don't expect to find anything of significance." Engineer Lyra, who had seen more than her fair share of ancient spacecraft, leaned forward. "This is beyond anything I've ever seen. The size of it alone is incredible." She glanced at the holographic display of the ship, which seemed to stretch out across the room. It was a dark, imposing structure, with no visible signs of life or advanced technology. "But if it's ancient, what could it possibly tell us? It's just another dead ship, like so many others we've encountered." Despite Lyra's skepticism, the council agreed that a team should be sent to investigate. The mission was handed over to Captain Mark, a brave and skilled leader known for his steady hand in dangerous situations. His crew consisted of Engineer Kai, a genius with a deep understanding of ancient machinery, and scientist Aelin, who had studied countless alien species and technologies over the years. Captain Mark's ship, the Stalwart, was one of the most advanced vessels in the galactic fleet. As it approached the unknown ship, the crew felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. It wasn't often that they encountered something truly unknown, and this ship, with its dark hull and strange shape, was unlike anything they had ever seen. "Let's approach cautiously," Captain Mark ordered. "We don't know what kind of dangers lie ahead." The Stalwart moved slowly toward the massive warship, its powerful engines humming softly in the silence of space. As they neared, the crew could make out more details. The hull was covered in strange markings, symbols that seemed familiar yet alien. The ship looked like it had been drifting for centuries, its surface covered in layers of dust and debris. There were no signs of life, no active signals. It was as if the ship had been abandoned long ago, forgotten by everyone. The crew docked with the ancient vessel, their hearts pounding as they prepared to board. They had no idea what they would find inside. But one thing was clear: this ship was no ordinary relic. As they stepped through the airlock and onto the ship's cold, metallic floors, the silence was deafening. The interior was even more unsettling. The halls were vast, stretching endlessly in all directions. The walls were lined with unfamiliar technology, some of it still glowing faintly, as if it had never truly been powered down. Strange markings were etched into the surfaces, and broken control panels lay scattered across the floors. It looked like a place that had seen battle and time, a ship that had been lost to history. "Stay alert," Captain Mark said, his voice low. "We don't know what we're dealing with here." The team began their search, moving cautiously through the labyrinth of the warship. As they explored, they found evidence of a once great civilization. Massive chambers that could hold thousands of beings, long empty cargo holds, and strange, abandoned weapons. But there was nothing alive here. No crew, no signs of recent activity. It was like stepping into a tomb, a place frozen in time. "We found something," Engineer Kai said suddenly, his voice echoing through the empty halls. He had discovered a large door at the end of a narrow corridor, hidden beneath a layer of dust. With his skills, he managed to pry it open, revealing a room that seemed to contain the heart of the ship. Inside, they found a massive control room, filled with consoles, strange symbols, and a massive central console that seemed to pulse with energy. The air in the room was thick with the smell of metal and aged technology. Captain Mark stepped forward, his eyes scanning the room. "This is it," he said. "This is where we'll find the answers." But just as he was about to approach the central console, something strange happened. The room flickered, and for a brief moment, the screens on the walls came to life. Images of distant stars, ships, and battles flashed across the display. But there was something else, something far more unsettling. A single word appeared on the main screen: humans. The crew froze. It was a name they had all heard of, but only in passing. The humans, an ancient species that had once been thought of as nothing more than a footnote in galactic history. The name had been all but erased from most records, lost to the ages. Humans? Ilyn whispered, disbelief in her voice. This ship, it was created by humans. The realization hit them all at once, and the crew stood in stunned silence. The ship they had mocked, the ancient warship they had dismissed as a relic, had been created by humans, a species they had long underestimated. The question now was, what had happened to the humans? And why had this ship, built by their hands, been left to drift in the cold emptiness of space for so long? The crew of the Stalwart stood in the heart of the ancient warship, their minds racing. The word humans had appeared on the main screen, and they all stared at it in stunned silence. No one had expected this. The ship, once thought to be a relic from an unknown civilization, had a far more surprising origin. It had been created by humans, a species believed to be long gone, their history buried and forgotten. Captain Mark was the first to break the silence. "We need answers," he said, his voice firm. "We can't just stand here and wonder what happened. Let's get to work." Engineer Kai nodded, already moving to one of the nearby consoles. His fingers flew across the ancient controls, trying to unlock more information. The screens flickered again, revealing more of the ship's history. Maps of distant star systems, blueprints of the warship, and data about its construction flooded the display. The ship was older than anything the crew had seen, but its design was efficient, even brilliant in its own way. It was clear that whoever had built it, they had been incredibly resourceful. "These designs, they're not like anything we know," Kai said, his voice filled with awe. "But they are clever. These humans, they knew what they were doing." Captain Mark paced back and forth, trying to wrap his mind around it. "I don't understand. Why would a species as small and isolated as humans build something like this? And why did they disappear?" Ilyn, the scientist, stepped forward, her eyes scanning the data on the screen. "Maybe they didn't disappear," she said, her voice thoughtful. "What if they went into hiding? Or what if they were wiped out in a war? But why would such a powerful ship end up abandoned here, drifting in the middle of nowhere?" The crew exchanged uneasy glances. The mystery deepened with every passing moment. Despite their curiosity, there was a strange sense of danger in the air. This wasn't just an abandoned ship, it was a puzzle, and each piece seemed to lead to more questions. "We should explore further," Mark said, his tone resolute. "We've only scratched the surface. This ship could hold secrets that the galaxy has forgotten." With that, the team split into groups to investigate the warship further. Kai and Ilyn worked together to search for any signs of life support systems, hoping to uncover more about how the ship had been used and how it had managed to survive for so long without a crew. Captain Mark led a separate group to explore the weaponry systems. They needed to know how powerful this ship truly was. As they moved deeper into the ship's bowels, the atmosphere grew colder and more eerie. The corridors were dimly lit, with only the faint glow of ancient lights providing any illumination. The hum of the ship's engines, which had once powered it with great force, now seemed to echo faintly through the ship's empty halls. In one of the engine rooms, Kai and Ilyn discovered something strange. The control systems for the ship's power source were still operational. It was as though the ship was still waiting to be activated, ready to come to life at a moment's notice. But there was no one here to command it. "This shouldn't be possible," Kai muttered as he examined the power systems. The energy source should have burned out centuries ago. Yet, it's still running. Barely, but it's running. Elin bent down to get a closer look. It's like the ship has been preserved somehow. But why? Who would go to such lengths to maintain something this powerful for so long? Meanwhile, Captain Mark and his group had reached the weapons systems. They were unlike any weapons the crew had seen before. Massive, heavily reinforced cannons capable of taking out entire fleets. The weapons were silent now, but the sheer size of them was enough to send a chill down their spines. Mark ran his hand over the cold metal of the gun's surface. These weapons, they look ancient, but they're incredibly advanced. Whoever built this ship, they didn't just want to survive. They wanted to dominate. Elin's voice crackled over the comms, breaking Mark's thoughts. "Captain, you need to see this. We found something." Mark quickly ordered his team to follow him back to Elin's location. When they arrived, they found her standing in front of a large control panel that seemed to be connected to the ship's main systems. The screen flickered to life again, this time showing a series of star maps, much like the ones they had seen before. But this time, there was something different. The maps were filled with markings, lines drawn across entire sectors of space, each one representing battles or conflicts. Some of the markings were old, while others were recent. The crew stared at the screen in shock. "This isn't just a ship," Elin said, her voice low. "This is a warship, and it's been waiting for a fight." The realization hit them hard. The ship had not been abandoned. It had been left here as a reminder of a war that was still ongoing. The humans had been preparing for something, perhaps a conflict that had never truly ended. Captain Mark stood still for a moment, trying to absorb everything. "We need to tell the Council. This changes everything." The humans weren't just a forgotten species. They were a powerful force, and this ship is proof of that. But even as he said the words, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were only beginning to uncover the true power of this warship. Something had happened to the humans, something that had caused them to disappear, or at least to vanish from the galaxy's sight. Whatever the truth was, one thing was clear. The ship was far from just a relic. It was a warning. The discovery of the warship had shaken the crew of the Stalwart. They had only just begun to unravel the mysteries hidden within its cold, metallic walls, and already their world had been turned upside down. The ship, once dismissed as an ancient relic, was now revealed to be the creation of humans, a species long thought insignificant. But what did that mean? How had humans, once a minor race in the galaxy, built such a powerful vessel? Captain Mark stood in front of the ancient console, his mind racing. His crew had gathered around him, staring at the screen that displayed the word humans. He had no answers, only more questions. "Is this some kind of joke?" Engineer Kai muttered, still in disbelief. "This ship, this warship, it was built by humans. How is that even possible?" Mark rubbed his temples, trying to clear his mind. "It doesn't make sense. Everything we know about humans tells us they were small, isolated, not capable of creating something like this. But the evidence is right here in front of us. This ship was made by them." Elin, the scientist, stepped forward, her eyes wide with curiosity. "We need to dig deeper. There has to be more information. The humans, whoever they were, didn't just disappear. They left something behind. We need to find out what happened to them." Captain Mark nodded. "You're right. We can't leave here without understanding the full story. We've come this far. We need to finish what we started." The crew spread out, continuing to search the ship's systems for clues. They combed through the control rooms, searching for any information that might explain how humans had created such a powerful warship. But as they worked, it became clear that the ship's history was more complicated than they had first thought. Kai was the first to make a breakthrough. While scanning through old databases, he found something that caught his attention. A series of files, marked Project Genesis, were hidden deep within the ship's archives. The files were old, encrypted, and incomplete, but they seemed to tell a story of a war, A war fought by humans against a much more advanced alien race. Project Genesis, Kai said softly, his voice tinged with excitement. This might be what we've been looking for. Mark approached the screen. What is it? What's in these files? Kai worked quickly, decrypting the files one by one. As the last file opened, the crew was met with a series of images and documents detailing a galactic conflict. The humans had been part of a larger intergalactic war, fighting against a race known only as the Zoreth. The Zoreth were technologically superior, with weapons far more advanced than anything the humans had. Yet, despite their lack of advanced technology, the humans had managed to survive, and even win, through sheer resourcefulness. Mark leaned in, reading the details. The humans, they didn't just fight. They adapted. They used what they had and turned it into something the Zoreth couldn't understand. It's like they used the Zoreth's own strength against them. Elend stepped forward, analyzing the documents. The war lasted for centuries. But it wasn't a typical war. It was a fight of survival. The humans weren't trying to conquer. They were trying to live. They used everything they had, every scrap of technology, every trick in the book, to stay alive and outsmart the Zoreth. The crew was silent as they processed the information. The humans hadn't been just a weak species trying to survive. They had been a force to be reckoned with. Their ingenuity had allowed them to hold their own against a race that should have been unbeatable. But there was more. As they continued to explore the files, a troubling piece of information surfaced. The humans had built this warship, the very one they were standing in, as part of their final effort to defeat the Zoreth. But it hadn't been the only ship. There had been many others, all part of a massive fleet that had once fought across the stars. Yet, despite their success in battle, the humans had disappeared. The files ended abruptly, with no explanation of what had happened to them. Had they been wiped out? Had they left the galaxy, never to return? Or had they simply vanished, lost to time? Captain Mark stood still for a long moment, his mind racing. They were more than we ever imagined. They fought, they survived, and they created this. But then, they just disappeared. Why? Elend's voice broke through his thoughts. Maybe they didn't disappear. Maybe they left this ship behind as a message, to whoever would find it. Maybe they were telling us that even when all seems lost, we can still fight back. The crew stood in silence, processing the weight of their discovery. They had come here expecting to find an abandoned ship, a forgotten relic of the past. Instead, they had uncovered a story of resilience, of a species that had fought against impossible odds, and had left behind a legacy of strength. But the mystery remained. Where had the humans gone? And why had they left behind such a powerful reminder of their existence? We need to report this to the Galactic Council, Captain Mark said, his voice steady. They need to know what we found. This isn't just the story of a lost species. It's a warning. We don't know what happened to the humans, but we need to be ready for whatever comes next. As the crew prepared to leave the warship, the weight of their discovery pressed heavily on their shoulders. They had uncovered the truth about the humans, about their power, their ingenuity, and their struggle for survival. But the biggest question of all remained unanswered. What had happened to them? And were they truly gone for good? The stalwart crew spent the next few hours preparing to leave the warship. The weight of their discovery hung over them. They had learned so much about the humans, how they had fought against the powerful Zoreth, how they had built ships like the one they were standing in, and how they had left a hidden legacy. Yet, despite all they had uncovered, one question remained unanswered. Where had the humans gone? Captain Mark, still in the warship's control room, stared at the last piece of the puzzle. The ship's main console flickered once more, but this time it displayed something unexpected, a warning. A message, seemingly left by the humans themselves, appeared on the screen. It was short, yet carried the weight of centuries of history. The message was clear and urgent. The Zoreth are not gone. They are waiting. The crew gathered around the screen, staring in disbelief. The message had been left so long ago, yet it seemed to speak directly to them. "What does this mean?" Ellen asked, her voice filled with confusion and concern. "Are the Zorath still out there? Were the humans warning us about them?" Mark's face hardened as he read the words again. "It means that whatever happened to the humans, it wasn't just a war they won. The Zorath were never fully defeated. They were waiting, possibly planning to return. And the humans knew it." Kai, who had been silent for a while, spoke up. "But how do we know the Zorath are still out there? This message could be from hundreds, maybe thousands of years ago. The Zorath might be gone by now." Elin shook her head. "I don't think the humans would leave a message like this unless they were sure. If they were gone for good, why leave a warning? They must have had a reason." Mark stood still, his mind working rapidly. The Zorath were a powerful, mysterious enemy, an alien race that had once terrorized the galaxy with advanced weapons and technology. If the humans were right, then the Zorath might still be a threat. It wasn't just a forgotten conflict. It was something that could resurface at any moment. "We need to find out more," Mark said finally. "The Galactic Council has to know about this. We need to warn them." The crew quickly made their way back to the Stalwart, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that they weren't just leaving the warship behind. They were stepping into a much larger battle. They had come to understand the humans and their strength, but now they had to face the reality that the threat the humans had fought was still out there, waiting. As they traveled back to the galactic hub, the silence in the ship was almost unbearable. Each crew member was lost in their own thoughts, grappling with the enormity of what they had uncovered. The humans had fought and survived against impossible odds, but now it seemed their war was far from over. The Zorath were still out there, and the warning left by the humans carried an undeniable urgency. Captain Mark had hoped that their mission would bring answers, not more questions. Yet here they were, facing an enemy they knew little about, with a warning from the past echoing in their minds. The Stalwart finally docked at the Galactic Council station. The crew hurried to the meeting room, where the council had already gathered, awaiting their report. The tension in the air was thick, as if the council sensed something had changed. "Captain Mark, you and your crew have returned," Commander Tal said, his voice stern but curious. "What have you found?" Mark stepped forward, his eyes never leaving the commander. "What we found changes everything," he said. "We discovered a warship built by humans, an ancient race thought to be long gone. But the ship wasn't just a relic. It was a weapon, part of a war against an alien race called the Zorath." The council members exchanged confused looks. Ambassador Jor spoke first. "The Zorath. I've heard of them, but they were wiped out centuries ago, weren't they?" "That's what we thought," Mark said. "But the humans left a message, a warning. They said, the Zorath are not gone. They are waiting." The room fell silent. For a long moment, no one spoke. The weight of Mark's words sank in. If the Zorath were still out there, if they were waiting for the right moment to return, then the galaxy was in danger. The humans had known this. But what had happened to them? Had they been wiped out by the Zorath, or had they left because they knew something the galaxy didn't? "The humans fought a battle we never knew about," Ellen added, stepping forward. "They were resilient, they adapted, and they built ships like the one we found. But they left us with a warning. We need to prepare. The Zorath could still be out there." Commander Tal stood up slowly, his face pale. "Then we must act. The threat of the Zorath is not something we can ignore." The crew of the Stalwart exchanged glances, each of them feeling the gravity of what had just been revealed. The humans were gone, but their legacy remained. The galaxy now had to prepare for a fight that had been forgotten, a battle that might soon be at their doorstep. The Galactic Council quickly realized the gravity of the situation. They had assumed the Zorath were a threat long vanquished, relegated to the history books. But now, with the warning from the humans and the discovery of their advanced warship, everything had changed. If the Zorath were indeed still out there, waiting. Then the galaxy was in danger once again. Captain Mark and his crew were summoned to an emergency meeting. The council chamber was filled with high-ranking officials, their faces serious and focused. Commander Tal stood at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. "Captain Mark," Commander Tal began, his voice low, "you've brought us alarming news. A warning from the humans about the Zoreth. How can we be sure this isn't a mistake?" Mark stood tall, meeting the commander's gaze. "We don't know for certain, but the humans were clear. They fought the Zoreth, they survived, and they built a ship, the one we found, ready to fight again. We found their message. The Zoreth are not gone. They are waiting. This is real." The room fell silent. The weight of the words echoed through the chamber. The Zoreth were known to be ruthless, technologically superior, and their past invasions had left the galaxy scarred. The idea that they might be preparing for a return was terrifying. Ambassador Jor, the Council's expert on intergalactic threats, spoke next. "But how do we know this ship wasn't just a last-ditch effort by the humans? Maybe the Zoreth have been destroyed long ago." Elin, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. "We've already considered that possibility. The ship we found isn't just a weapon, it's a message. The Zoreth didn't just disappear. If they were wiped out, the humans wouldn't have left a warning. The humans knew something, and we need to listen." Mark nodded. The Zoreth were capable of adapting quickly. They could be waiting for the right time to strike, and we have no way of knowing when that time will come. The humans thought ahead, and we need to do the same. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. The humans had fought a desperate war, and now it seemed the galaxy would have to face their enemy once more. "The question is," Commander Tal said, his voice stern, "what do we do now? How do we prepare for an enemy we know so little about?" Mark paused before answering. "We start by gathering information. We need to learn everything we can about the Zoreth, what they're capable of, where they are, and when they might strike. We cannot afford to be unprepared." The council agreed. They immediately began to form a strategy involving the most advanced ships, the best scientists, and the most experienced commanders. The Stalwart and its crew were tasked with a critical mission: to track down any signs of the Zoreth, to find out if they were truly still out there, and if so, to prepare the galaxy for war. Days passed, and the Stalwart and other ships set out to search the stars for any trace of the Zoreth. The crew worked tirelessly, scanning every corner of space, hoping to find something. Anything that could confirm the humans' warning. But every system they checked was empty. There were no signs of Zoreth activity. No fleets, no communications, nothing. Elin was the first to voice the growing concern. What if we're wrong? What if the Zoreth really are gone, and the humans just overestimated the danger? Mark shook his head. "I don't think they were wrong. The humans left this warning for a reason. We've seen their technology, and we know they were survivors. If they said the Zoreth were waiting, I believe them." The uncertainty continued to grow, but they had no choice but to keep searching. As the days turned into weeks, the crew grew anxious. They had no answers, but they knew they couldn't stop until they found the truth. One night, as the crew gathered in the mess hall, something unexpected happened. The sensors on the Stalwart picked up a strange signal, a faint but unmistakable pattern. It was an ancient Zoreth communication signal, one that had been recorded long ago during the first invasion. Kai, who was on duty at the time, immediately alerted the crew. "Captain, you need to see this." Mark rushed to the bridge. On the screen, the signal was coming from a distant system at the edge of known space. The pattern was unlike anything the crew had ever encountered, but it was unmistakably Zoreth. "This is it," Mark said, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "The Zoreth are out there. They've been waiting. And now, they're making their move." The room fell silent. The crew stared at the screen, knowing that they were about to embark on a mission that would determine the fate of the galaxy. The Zoreth had returned, and they were ready to fight. "We'll need to move fast," Mark said, his tone resolute. "We'll gather reinforcements and head to that system immediately. The time for waiting is over." The Stalwart and its crew set their course for the distant signal, knowing that the war they had uncovered was far from finished. The galaxy would face a new threat, and they had no choice but to be ready for whatever came next. The Stalwart raced toward the source of the Zorath signal. Every crew member felt the tension in the air. For weeks, they had searched for signs, for proof that the Zorath were still out there. And now, they had it. The signal was unmistakable, a relic of the past. It wasn't just a random noise, it was a call. The Zorath were awake, and they were waiting. Captain Mark stood at the front of the bridge, his eyes fixed on the blinking lights of the distant star system. "Set course for the coordinates," he commanded. "We don't know what we'll find when we get there, but we have to be ready for anything." Elin, who had been analyzing the signal, looked up. "We're getting closer, but the signal is weak. It's almost as if they're trying to hide it. Whoever, whatever, is out there doesn't want to be found." Kai, the engineer, glanced nervously at the data screens. "The system we're heading to is far from any major trade routes. It's on the edge of known space, surrounded by asteroid fields and dead planets. There's not much out there." "That's what makes it the perfect hiding place," Mark replied. "The Zorath would know that. If they were going to regroup, they'd do it somewhere out of sight." The crew worked together in silence, each member focused on their tasks. The Stalwart flew through the stars, and the tension in the air only grew stronger as they approached the mysterious system. The silence felt heavy, oppressive, as if the very stars themselves were holding their breath. As the ship neared the system, the signal grew stronger. It was clear now. The Zorath were here. They had been hiding, waiting. The question now was why, and what they had been doing for all these years. "We're coming up on the outer edge of the system," Kai said, his voice tense. "There's a large asteroid field in the way. We'll need to navigate carefully." Mark nodded. "Take us through, Kai. Slow and steady. No mistakes." The crew held their breath as the Stalwart entered the asteroid field. The massive rocks floated silently in space, casting shadows across the ship's path. It was a maze of debris, and one wrong move could send the ship crashing into one of the larger asteroids. Kai's hands moved swiftly over the controls, guiding the ship through the dangerous field. His eyes never left the sensor readings. "We've got an opening ahead. Almost there." The tension in the air was almost unbearable as they pushed forward. The crew knew that whatever was waiting for them beyond the field could change everything. The Zorath, the enemy they had been warned about, could be preparing for war. Finally, the asteroid field ended. Beyond it lay a dead planet, its surface scorched and barren. At first, it seemed empty, abandoned. But then, Mark's eyes narrowed. There on the planet's surface was something he hadn't expected to see, the faint outline of a large structure, partially buried in the planet's cracked surface. "Is that what I think it is?" Elin asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Mark nodded. "It looks like a Zorath base, hidden in plain sight, buried in the ruins of this dead world." "We need to get closer," Elin said urgently. "If they've been hiding here, it means they've been planning something. We can't let them get the upper hand." Mark glanced at his crew, then back at the base. "Agreed. Kai, bring us in. But keep your eyes open. There may be more than just that base down there." The Stalwarts slowly descended toward the planet. As they got closer, the crew could see more details of the structure. It was massive, built to withstand anything that might come its way. It looked as though it had been there for centuries, and yet it was still operational, waiting for something or someone. Suddenly, the ship's sensors beeped, alerting them to something approaching fast. Mark's heart skipped a beat. "What is that?" "Unknown ship approaching," Kai responded. "It's Zorath, all right. It's one of their destroyers." The crew sprang into action, preparing for the worst. The Zoreth weren't just hiding. They were preparing for war. And now, the stalwart was standing in their way. Mark gave the order. Prepare for battle. Activate all shields and weapons. We'll hold them off long enough to find out what's going on down there. The Zoreth destroyer loomed closer, its dark shape cutting through space like a predator stalking its prey. The crew could see the weapons powering up on the destroyer's hull, ready to strike. Aelin gripped the controls tightly. They're preparing to fire. We don't have much time. We won't let them destroy us, Mark said firmly. We'll fight back with everything we've got. The battle was about to begin. The stalwart was outnumbered, but its crew had faced danger before, and they knew they had no choice but to stand and fight. The fate of the galaxy was on the line, and they couldn't let the Zoreth rise again. The stalwart stood its ground, facing the Zoreth destroyer. The tension in the air was thick, and every crew member could feel the weight of what was about to happen. The enemy ship was massive, dark, and menacing. Its weapons powered up, ready to strike. But Captain Mark wasn't backing down. Not now. Not after everything they had uncovered. Aelin, Kai, get the weapons online, Mark commanded, his voice steady but sharp. We can't let them have the upper hand. Aelin's hands moved quickly across the console, activating the ship's weapon systems. Weapons online. But Captain, we're outmatched here. That destroyer is far more advanced than anything we have. I know, Mark replied, his face grim. But we have one advantage. They're not expecting us to fight back. We'll make them regret that. The crew braced themselves as the first blast from the Zoreth destroyer erupted into the black void of space. The stalwart shook under the force of the impact, the shields flickering for a moment before stabilizing. We're still holding steady, Kai reported from the engine room. But we can't take too many more hits like that. Mark's eyes narrowed as he looked at the approaching enemy ship. He knew they had to act fast. Aelin, fire back. Take out their weapon systems. Now. Aelin hit the button, sending a burst of energy from the stalwart's cannons. The blast struck the Zoreth ship's outer hull, creating a brilliant flash of light. For a moment, the Zoreth destroyer faltered, its weapon systems momentarily disrupted. But it quickly recovered and continued its advance. We're not out of the woods yet, Aelin warned, her voice tense. We need a better plan. Mark thought quickly. If they couldn't overpower the Zoreth destroyer with sheer firepower, they would need to outmaneuver it. They needed to get closer to the Zoreth base, where they could use the terrain to their advantage. Hold steady, everyone, Mark said, a plan forming in his mind. Kai, get us in closer to that base. We'll use it as cover. Kai nodded, his fingers dancing across the controls. The stalwart began to move, weaving between asteroids and debris, getting closer to the dead planet and the hidden Zoreth base. The Zoreth destroyer followed, unwilling to let their target escape. But as they neared the planet, Mark could see something new on the horizon. Something unexpected. A group of smaller Zoreth ships had emerged from the base, swarming toward them like a horde of angry insects. We've got company, Aelin shouted, seeing the new ships on the scanners. There are more of them. Mark clenched his fists. The odds were getting worse by the second. The stalwart couldn't fight off the entire Zoreth fleet, not without reinforcements, but reinforcements weren't coming. Not in time. We need to buy ourselves some time, Mark said, his mind racing. Aelin, fire at their lead ship. Kai, keep us in motion. Don't let them lock onto us. The crew worked in unison, firing at the lead Zoreth ship. The blast from the stalwart's cannons hit the enemy ship hard, tearing a hole in its side. The ship veered off course, sending the other Zoreth ships into disarray for a moment. But the stalwart was already taking damage. The shields flickered again, and the ship groaned under the strain. The Zoreth were closing in. Time was running out. Captain, Aelin said urgently, we can't keep this up. We need to fall back and regroup. Mark shook his head. We don't have that luxury. We can't let them have the base. We can't let them win. Then, just as the situation seemed impossible, something unexpected happened. A flash of light erupted from the other side of the system. Mark's eyes widened in surprise as he saw several ships, a fleet, emerge from the distance. It was the Galactic Council's reinforcements. "We're not alone," Ilin shouted, her voice filled with hope. The reinforcements arrived just in time. The new fleet engaged the Zoreth ships, drawing their attention away from the stalwart and giving the crew a much-needed break. Mark watched as the Galactic Council ships fought the Zoreth with precision and power. The tide was turning. The Zoreth were no longer the unstoppable force they had seemed. With the reinforcements' firepower, the stalwart and its crew had a chance to strike back. "Now's our chance," Mark said. "Ilin, we're going in. Full speed ahead." With the Zoreth distracted, the stalwart shot forward, racing toward the Zoreth base. They were close now, close enough to strike at the heart of the Zoreth operation. Mark's heart pounded as they entered the atmosphere of the dead planet, and the base loomed closer. "Prepare to fire," Mark ordered. "Take out the main power core of their base. That's the only way we'll stop them from launching a full-scale invasion." The crew locked onto the target, and with a final powerful blast, the stalwart fired at the core of the Zoreth base. The explosion that followed shook the planet, sending shockwaves through space. The Zoreth ships, now without a command center, began to falter. The reinforcements from the Galactic Council took full advantage, destroying the remaining Zoreth ships one by one. It was over. The Zoreth had been defeated. But as the crew of the stalwart looked around at the wreckage, they knew the victory wasn't just about winning the battle. They had uncovered a secret. The Zoreth weren't gone. They had been hiding. And now, thanks to the humans' warning and their fight, the galaxy had a chance to rebuild, stronger than ever before. "Well done, everyone," Mark said, a rare smile tugging at his lips. "The galaxy is safe. For now."